This video was recorded at the EA Sports FIFA 17 capture event. EA were kind enough to invite myself and a select few other YouTubers down to London to play an early access build of the game. As such, all of the player ratings aren't necessarily final, and they were also kind enough to cover all food and drink expenses for the day, so a massive thank you to them for that. Hopefully you guys enjoy the video though, and we'll jump into it right now. Hey guys, welcome to another transfer budgets and board expectations video. Earlier on in the week we had a look at the Premier League. If you missed that video, check the channel page for it and you'll be able to find it there, along with a video I did with Matt Gamer discussing in a little bit more detail a couple of the individual budgets that we looked at in that video, and one that actually is going to crop up in this video as well. We start at the beginning of the alphabet with A, and it's Athletic Bilbao, the first side that we look at. Most notable thing to point out here is that youth development is critical. Of course, Bilbao in real life have a policy that they only sign and play players from the Basque region of Spain / Basque region of France, because it kind of crosses the border, but the Basque region of Spain / France is the only area of the world that they allow themselves to buy and get players from. So youth development is going to be absolutely crucial, because obviously there aren't that many players to pick from. There's not a large pool, so if they can bring through their own players from that region, that is absolutely vital. Only a £14.8 million transfer budget though for a side that finished 5th in La Liga last year. That is tiny. A real challenge at Bilbao should you wish to take them on. Moving on to the second team though, and this one will be less of a challenge to be competitive at the top of La Liga, but still might be a challenge to overtake Barcelona and Real Madrid. It's of course the second side in Madrid, Atletico. And as you might expect with Atletico, the board expectations are pretty high for domestic, continental and brand exposure. Low on financial, again, because they have a lot of financial clout, and youth development is set to medium. They have brought through a couple of really good young players, so they'll look to try and do that again in this FIFA save if you choose to use them. However, you do have a slightly larger budget at your disposal than you would at Bilbao to improve the side, £51 million. That's a rather large amount of money, so there's plenty you could do there. Of course, they have already made a number of new signings in real life prior to the beginning of this FIFA save, so you'll be able to use players like Nico Gaitan, who's a fantastic winger. I'm surprised it's taken so long for anyone to actually bring him from the Portuguese league to like the Premier League or to La Liga, etc., because he's been so good for years. But they have a number of great players, Atleti, and clearly going to be one of the best sides in La Liga, and it won't be too difficult to try and make them one of the better sides in all of Europe as well. One of the smaller sides, however, in the division is Osasuna. They came up through the playoffs last year from Liga Adelante. They finished 6th in the Segunda division, but they were able and did manage to get themselves into La Liga again for the first time in a couple of years. Only a 3.7 million budget though, which is tiny. You really won't be able to do much with that, and as such, it's probably pretty accurate that youth development has a very high board expectation, because of course without the money to buy in players, you have to bring the players through the youth system. The club worth is only 12.7 million, which is just unfathomably small. It's such a tiny club value that I almost thought when I saw it that there was a glitch there and there should be an extra zero or something, but 12.75 million is the club worth and the transfer budget is only 3.6. That is going to be one of the most difficult sides to take on in La Liga. But again, as the case with Bilbao, would be a different kind of challenge, but still a challenge nonetheless. And another side that will cause you even bigger challenge, perhaps, is Leganés. They joined Osasuna in La Liga after finishing 2nd in the Segunda Liga and getting automatic promotion. But they have an even smaller transfer budget and an even smaller club worth. 2.6 and 7.2 million respectively. Everything is very low apart from a medium financial requirement. And that is probably going to be the main point of focus for you at a club this small, is just to concentrate on improving the bank balance so that eventually you can start to challenge to maybe rise out of the bottom 5 or 6 teams in La Liga. But unless you're extremely good at FIFA or playing on a difficulty level that is perhaps slightly too low for you, I would presume that you would really struggle if you were to take over at Leganés. However, you might have a little bit of a better time of things at CELTA Vigo. No Nolito now, of course, as he's moved to Manchester City. However, you do have a slightly larger transfer budget at almost 9 million, but the transfer budgets here in La Liga compared to the ones in the Premier League are just, well, they're almost incomparable because they're so much smaller here. Even the sides that had just been promoted out of the Championship had like 20 million towards 30 million for teams like Middlesbrough and Burnley. So to have a side that finished 6th in La Liga last year, have a budget of under £9 million, and obviously Bilbao's budget was under £20 million, it's ludicrous how much little money there is in the other bigger European leagues around Europe. So I'm not sure whether you'd be able to replicate Celta Vigo's 6th placed finish in FIFA if you were playing on like the highest level, difficulty level, etc. Because Sevilla actually finished below Celta Vigo last year, down in 7th, and Sevilla are a side I'm contemplating doing a series with later in the year. So Sevilla need to be turned around a little bit after obviously having really good times in Europe recently, but Celta Vigo, as the club of focus, would probably be, I mean, you should probably be happy if you could just get them into the top half, I think, after losing a very influential player in Nolito. But there's a little bit of money there to perhaps do something with, but again, might have to concentrate on the youth at a club of this size. Surprisingly, though, a club that are even smaller than Celta Vigo and another club that came up from the Segunda Liga last year, Deportivo Alavés, they, of course, just recently beat Barcelona at the Camp Nou in real life, but I do expect them to struggle, all told, for the season, and as you can see, a very small club worth and transfer budget again here for Alavés. Again, financial success is of medium expectation. I would have thought youth development would have been pretty important at these smaller clubs, but as you can see here, the Deportivo board supposedly don't really place too much emphasis on it. So again, it's going to be a case of sorting out the bank balance and then trying to push on from there at all 3 of the promoted sides from the Segunda division, and maybe half of the other sides in the division that are on the smaller side. We'll get to them in a moment, but going from one of the smaller sides in the division to one of the bigger sides in the world, it's Barcelona. £78 million transfer budget, £2 billion club worth, critical expectations for domestic success, continental success, brand exposure and youth development, and rather understandably a low emphasis on financial security, etc. But you'll need to be winning trophies season in, season out at Barcelona to keep hold of your job, you would have thought. And again, with, as I mentioned in the video, or both myself and Matt mentioned in the video with Matt HD Gamer earlier on in the week, youth development at Barcelona is absolutely vital. They love bringing players through from the youth setup and bleeding them into the first team because they've done it so very successfully up until now, and you're going to have to continue that success as you head into a FIFA 17 series with them, both off the pitch with the youth development and on the pitch with the domestic and continental success. No real surprise that everything is critical there, to be completely honest. Barcelona, arguably the best team in Europe right now, although, of course, Bayern Munich and Real Madrid would have something to say about that. Barcelona did win La Liga last year by a single point ahead of Real. So, and you'd also have to say, especially considering they just thumped Celtic 7-0, that perhaps Messi, Neymar and Suarez are the the best trio of forward players in the sport ever? Question mark. I may even do a video solely revolving around that, if you might be interested in seeing it, kind of an in real life video or in real life comment video to kind of discuss the idea of Suarez, Messi and Neymar being the best 3 forward players as a trio of all time. If you'd like to see that, then let me know in the comment section down below. But in game, they're the 3 best trio as well. So Barcelona, you are going to have to win every single trophy you are involved in, and if you don't, then your job might be in peril. Moving on from Barcelona, we come to Granada. They were able to finish just 16th, a single point above the relegation zone last season. Less than a £6 million transfer budget. Again, as expected, high financial expectations here. Medium youth development, low brand exposure, and very low domestic and continental success. No real surprise that all of these smaller clubs in Spain have a high emphasis on just sorting the bank balance out and making sure you've got enough money to compete and stay in the league. And it may take a couple of seasons to give yourselves the financial situation to be able to push forward and actually challenge for the top half of the table. A side that do challenge for the top half of the table, though, despite not having much money anymore, is Malaga. A few years ago, they were just had so much money at their disposal, and they were able to get themselves into the Champions League. Things have gone downhill since then at La Rosaleda, unfortunately, and they find themselves with just a £7.5 million transfer budget and club worth of only £85 million. Things went from good to bad, but fortunately for them, they were able to finish in the top half last year, finishing 8th ahead of Real Sociedad, who didn't have the strongest of seasons considering the strength of their squad. So again, high emphasis on financial, but because they can do themselves some justice with some good youth players, and perhaps you might be able to finish inside the Europa League spots if you have a really good season in the first year at Malaga. But there's definitely potential there at the club that are well over 100 years old now, that you'll be able to perhaps in a couple of seasons, maybe in the third season, challenge for a Champions League spot if you were able to do well enough on the pitch and manage the balance. You know, sell the high-rated players, bring in low-rated players that can grow to high-rated players to perhaps then sell them on and repeat the process again and again. But it's a system that should work for you should you decide to take over at Malaga. Deportivo finished in 15th last year, a side that actually drew 18 games in the league, more than any other side. In fact, 6 more than any other side in the league. It was actually Malaga that were joint second with Real Betis with the stat of most draws in the league. But drawing 18 of your 38 games is pretty mad. If they could have turned even a handful of those draws into wins, they could have been right up in the top half of the table. They were only 10 points in 15th behind Sevilla in 7th. So turn 4 of those draws, which would still leave them with more draws than anybody else, into wins last year, and they could have been challenging for a European spot. But Depor, as you can see on screen, really don't have that much money at their disposal either. £7.9 million available for them to spend. Medium for the majority, although low domestic and continental success. Again, it's a rebuilding job with a number of these smaller sides in La Liga, as we've said, and it's going to be the case again for Deportivo La Coruña. But moving on from them, we find ourselves having a look at Espanyol, the second side in Barcelona, of course. They're local neighbours. I wouldn't say rivals. There's really not a massive rivalry between the two, as they've never really been that competitive compared to Barcelona, of course. But they finished in 13th last year, just a single point behind Valencia, but everybody knows how bad Valencia were last year, and they actually had the worst goal difference in the entire league last year, Espanyol, conceding 74 goals. 74. That's 4 more than the side that finished bottom of the table, Levante. They had such a poor season last year. Defensively, they really need improving, as we say, and it would be a great road to glory series, trying to take Espanyol from that sort of season to maybe 5, 6, 7 seasons down the line, having them as the best side in Barcelona. It would be a really fun series to do. I may even contemplate doing it on the channel, but I'm probably going to do a Road to Glory series with Cambridge United instead, my local team here in England, as I did in FIFA 15. That went down very well, so I'm hoping that it will go down very well again this year. Moving on from Espanyol, we have Real Betis, heavily reliant on the goals of Ruben Castro, and will probably continue to be heavily reliant on the goals of Ruben Castro for you in the first season, as they don't have that large a budget. 13 million for Betis to spend. Low domestic success, very low continental success. Basically not expecting you to get into Europe at all, at least in the first season. Medium expectations for brand exposure, financial and youth development. They have a couple of good players. Of course, you've got Charlie Musonda on loan there from Chelsea with the 5-star weak foot and the 5-star skill moves and a big upgrade to 77 rated. So there is some, decent prospects at Betis, but again, it's going to be a side that you really struggle to get into the European spots with, at least in the first season. They finished slap bang mid-table last season, 10th. And so we find ourselves at the side that have the biggest club worth in the entirety of FIFA 16. Very nearly £2.3 billion. An £84.8 million budget is the biggest in La Liga. And as such, of course, you are expected to compete and succeed on all fronts. Critical expectations for domestic and continental success, critical expectations for brand exposure. Youth development, however, at Real Madrid is only high comparatively to the critical youth development at Barcelona, but very, very similar to the expectations for the other largest side in the league. And again, as is the case with Barca and probably Atleti to some extent, you are going to have to be successful on every single front. You'd say perhaps with Atleti it's just getting to finals of competitions, whereas of course with Real it's winning those competitions. 11 Champions League titles now, and looking to make that 12 with your season at Real Madrid in FIFA 17. As we said earlier, Real Sociedad had a rather poor season last time out, finishing down in 9th. They do still have a number of good players at their disposal, most notably Carlos Vela. Obviously don't have Antoine Griezmann, but haven't had him for a couple of years now, so he's probably still needing to be replaced at Sociedad, really, but you only have £12 million to try and do that replacing with. Again, unsurprisingly, youth development expectations are high. You're going to have to look and perhaps try and replace Griezmann from within the club rather than buying in a player from somewhere else. But Sociedad are a side that you could quite capably finish inside the top 6 with first year and maybe push second season with a little bit extra money towards the top 4 and look for that Champions League spot. Up next, Eibar, a side that perhaps were very, very lucky to even still be in La Liga for last season. After 2 years ago, they finished in the relegation zone, but after Elche had some financial issues, it was Elche that got relegated instead of Eibar. They stayed up, and last year actually were able to finish up in 14th. So a decent season for Eibar. For a club that size, a very, very good year. Strangely, youth development is very low here, so I'm not really too sure what they expect you to do with barely any budget and not really putting any emphasis on bringing kids through the system. So I don't know where you might want to prioritise with Eibar. You might still want to go down the youth development route, but you don't necessarily have to go down the youth development route. If you can get, have a couple of cup runs in the Copa del Rey, maybe force yourself into the top half and get some extra prize money from a league finish, you might be able to bring in some players of decent calibre just by buying them rather than having to bring them up through the youth system. And maybe Eibar would be another fantastic option for a La Liga Road to Glory series. Sevilla, on the other hand, are perhaps, like I mentioned earlier on, I might be thinking about doing a series with them. They're a side that have lost a couple of big players in recent years, most notably Carlos Bacca and Kevin Gamero. Bacca went to AC Milan, of course, 2 years ago, or was it 1 year ago? Last year. He went last summer, and this summer just gone. Kevin Gamero has gone from Sevilla, their top goal scorer last year. He's moved on to Atletico Madrid. So Sevilla do need some work, but they have brought in a number of new signings themselves this year. So they are a good prospect still for pushing for top 4 football in La Liga, especially considering you will be in the Champions League with Sevilla already, thanks to them winning the Europa League for the 3rd time in 3 consecutive seasons. So there's a lot to be done at Sevilla, and I would very much like to do a series with them at some point in FIFA 17. Maybe a little bit later on in the year. I'm going to start with Everton, as you know. I may do a Cambridge United Road to Glory after that series and then go to Sevilla, or I might do Sevilla after Everton and then go and do a Cambridge United Road to Glory. Haven't yet decided. There's still a lot to be done with regards to FIFA 17 and deciding what series I'm going to do, but a lot of it will come back to your feedback, so do let me know in the comment section down below what you think of those potential series ideas. Moving on from Sevilla, though, we have another small side in the league. There's not really much I can add to another tiny side in the league. A £4 million budget, £14.5 million club worth. Youth development is critical, though. That's going to be the main focus of your time at Sporting Gijón or Real Sporting, whichever way you choose to pronounce their name. But again, there's so many small sides in La Liga, there's not really much I can add here. So moving on, we have Las Palmas, and of course Las Palmas, another small side in La Liga, finished in 11th last year, so did pretty well, and they've signed Kevin Prince Boateng on a free in the transfer window just gone. High financial, high youth development, again, not really much I can add here, so we will move on to Valencia, who have a massive, massive transfer budget, one of the biggest in the league. And of course, in real life, they have been taken over as well. So you can understandably see why the transfer budget is up just over £45 million. Fantastic squad already at Valencia, although they have lost Paco Alcacer to Barcelona. So you are perhaps going to have to look for a striker as your first main signing. Weirdly, I think the only side that we've seen so far that value brand exposure above anything else. which is intriguing. I'm not really too sure why. I would have thought Valencia already have a decent brand, so they wouldn't need to push that hard on it. They would be more considered, or I would have thought they would have been more concerned about domestic success and continental success, but clearly not. I'm mistaken. A £500 million value as a club, and there's a lot of work that can be done at Valencia and a lot of good players already there for you to build upon. Would be a fun series. I used them last year, but only briefly before I completely switched up how content went out on my channel. So I probably won't do Valencia this year, but maybe for FIFA 18. And the final side we look at is Villarreal. £26.5 million transfer budget, high domestic and continental success, as well as high youth development. Villarreal finished 4th last year, had a very, very good season, but of course were extremely unlucky in the fact that Sevilla won the Europa League and took this spot in the Champions League away from them. Had they been able to finish 4th and not have Sevilla finish win the Europa League, Villarreal would have had Champions League football this year. But unfortunately for them, Sevilla did go and win the trophy for the 3rd year in a row, took the final Champions League spot away from them, and as such, they have to compete in the Europa League this year. Though you do still have European football, and you would expect Villarreal to do well in Europe. So another side, similarly to Valencia and Sevilla, that kind of loiter around that 4th, 5th, 6th spot every season, and really should perhaps push on and do a little bit better with your help. Villarreal did drop down into the Segunda Division, of course, not too long ago. They had some financial issues, but have since then solidified again and pushed themselves further forward towards the upper reaches of La Liga. But that's going to bring this La Liga budgets and budgets and expectations review video to a close. Drop the video a like if you enjoyed. I will have the Premier League one already uploaded. I'm not sure in what order the rest of these will go up, so there will be at some point either already uploaded or uploaded soon a Bundesliga and a Serie A one as well. So drop the video a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel for more FIFA 17 content, and I'll see you next time.